Welcome to The Explainer. Have you ever felt like your daily actions aren't quite lining up with what you actually believe? Well, today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating blueprint for building an integrated, deeply meaningful life. The diverse set of thinkers we're exploring today have mapped out the exact operating system you need to bridge that gap. So let's jump right in.
We're starting off with this incredibly powerful, anonymous three-line instruction. Hold strong to your convictions. Remain humble in your speech. Let your actions tell your story. It doesn't have an author attached to it, but it essentially serves as the ultimate operating system for living well. It's the distilled output of a truly examined life.
What's absolutely fascinating here is how these three little lines create a continuous, self-correcting feedback loop. Think about it. Conviction fuels your action. That action is then tempered by humility, and that same humility forces you to honestly evaluate your convictions. It demands that we constantly do the hard, quiet, interior work of knowing what we actually believe, rather than just clinging to what sounds good.
Here is our roadmap for the explainer. We are moving step by step from internal self-examination all the way out to external action. We'll cover our daily operating systems, defeating our inner enemies, building true alliances, anchoring our virtue, mastering the architecture of change, and finally, why we should absolutely be collecting moments over things.
We're covering some truly vast territory today. We're talking about 19 different thinkers, literally everyone from Marcus Aurelius to Tom Brady, and they all magically converge on these core thematic nodes to create what we call the integrated life. They are all pointing toward this central, unified idea.
Section 1. Defeating the enemy within and the work of honest seeing. Because before we can build the sturdy walls of our life, we have to clear the foundation of its biggest bug, which is self-deception.
Okay, let's dive into this. The legendary physicist Richard Feynman gives us a brilliant diagnostic tool here. Step 1, you have to acknowledge the disease. And the disease is that no one is easier to fool than yourself. Step 2 is applying the test. If you cannot explain something in simple terms, you don't actually understand it. Listen, if your convictions are constantly hidden in this defensive fog of complex language, there's a very good chance you're deceiving yourself.
Confucius hits the nail on the head regarding this exact need for an internal audit. He tells us to attack the evil that is within ourselves rather than attacking the evil that is in others. Because let's be honest, it is so incredibly easy and honestly kind of enjoyable to point out the flaws in everyone else, right? But unflinchingly auditing our own motivations, that is the real heavy lifting work that most people spend their entire lives trying to evade. So how do we actually apply this? Well, Leo Tolstoy shares this incredible story about Rabbi Samuel, who literally faced death just to return a lost jewel. The penalty for returning it late was execution, but he did it anyway. Why? To prove his virtue was driven by God, not by a fear of the empress's punishment, and certainly not out of mere convenience. This is the ultimate Feynman test in action. Make your virtue expensive. Which really forces us to ask ourselves, is your virtue expensive or is it cheap?
Moving on to Section 2, the alliance question. Who do you actually let in? Now that our internal foundation is honest, let's look at how we connect with others and start framing the walls of our architecture.
There's a really fascinating tension when we look at how we form bonds with people. On one hand, you have Robert Greene warning us against false alliances. You know, the kind driven by sheer emotional desperation, where you end up surrendering your own identity in autonomous decision-making. But on the flip side, Pearl S. Buck reminds us of the power of true alliances. She points out that total isolation literally withers the human heart. We absolutely need the friction from other minds to preserve our identity and keep ourselves from stagnating.
And the solution to this tension isn't some clever, manipulative networking strategy. Just look at this profound insight from Abraham. Just find your alignment, and those who are also in alignment will recognize you. True allies are naturally attracted to the authenticity you radiate once you've done that internal Feynman work and become genuinely yourself.
Now, this concept of integrity scales all the way up to massive organizations, too. The famous management expert Peter Drucker argues that good intentions are not always socially responsible. You should never dilute your mission. You have to know what you are for. Chasing noble-sounding causes at the expense of your core function, that's actually just the organizational version of a false alliance.
Section 3. Anchoring your virtue. What exactly happens when virtue stands alone? Every strong structure needs an anchor that exists completely independent of human approval, social reward, or fear.
I just love this incredible juxtaposition. On one side, you have the ancient Stoic philosopher Cicero telling us that everything is transient and only virtue is indestructible. Then on the other side, you have the modern extreme athlete Wim Hof, noting that nature is a harsh but righteous teacher. Think about it. Nature gives perfectly accurate feedback on who you really are. The freezing cold water doesn't care about your intentions. It only cares about your actions. Both of these thinkers demand an encounter with what is actually true.
George Christoph Lichtenberg summarizes how we get there perfectly. One's first step in wisdom is to question everything, and one's last is to come to terms with everything. That beautiful sweeping arc from radical questioning all the way to radical acceptance is exactly what produces a life anchor capable of withstanding any external pressure.
Section 4. The Architecture of Change, Small Steps and Embodied Mastery. So, how on earth do we actually install this operating system and run it in our chaotic daily lives?
Simon Sinek brings this right down to earth for us. He notes that people are terrified of big changes, but they usually embrace little ones. And those little changes, they add up to one big one. Letting your actions tell your story isn't about pulling off one dramatic, heroic performance. It's about the quiet, unseen accumulation of small, right choices made day after day after day.
We can see this incremental approach captured perfectly in Tom Brady's formula for success. Step 1, find out what's good. Step 2, find out what's bad. Step 3, do more good and less bad. Honestly, this is just the Feynman test applied perfectly to ethics. The formula is almost comically simple because the real challenge is in the daily execution, not in understanding some complex framework. You probably already know what's good and bad. The hard part is just doing it consistently.
And that daily consistency, that's what leads to embodied mastery. We define this as when character is expressed so naturally through honest, incremental practice that it no longer requires conscious effort. Golf instructor Bob Toski captures this beautifully when he talks about a natural golf swing. True mastery happens when virtue is so deeply absorbed into your muscles through practice that you act rightly without even having to think about it. It becomes a reflex.
But eventually, you have to execute. As Clint Eastwood famously says, sometimes, if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands. Both Eastwood and the ancient philosopher Seneca urge us to recognize that our time on this planet is finite. The clock is ticking. Once the foundation is laid and the mastery is practiced, you have to step up and act.
Which brings us to our final section, collect moments, not things. This is the ultimate reward. It's the final room in our house and the ultimate destination for building this entire architecture.
So what exactly makes up a moment? The anatomy of a true moment requires being fully present, making the hard but right choice, connecting with a true ally, and acting with quiet integrity. You see, things just accumulate passively in the background of our lives, but capturing a true moment, that requires the active, intentional alignment of your conviction, your humility, and your action.
The architecture holds, not because the world is kind, but because they are clear. Look, this operating system is not going to make you flawless, and it certainly won't insulate you from hardship. But it will give you a rock-solid structure that holds firm against absolutely anything, simply because of your own absolute internal clarity.
I'm going to leave you with this one question to ponder today. Are you busy passively collecting things? Or are you doing the hard, quiet, interior work to build an architecture that holds? Take a close look at your own daily operating system, apply the Feynman test to it, and ask yourself what you are truly building today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you build something that lasts.